Find an equation that represents this graph. One is that is of the form y equals a sine bx plus c, or y equals a cosine bx plus c. Turns out we can actually write this in using either one of these forms, so let's actually do both. For the sine graph, first I see that this graph, if we think of it as a sine function, starts right at the origin, so there's been no shift. The maximum height that the graph attains happens here at y equals 2. So our amplitude is 2. The period is the distance from the starting point of one cycle to the end point of one cycle. So I see that happens from 0 to pi. So that distance is pi. From this, we have our formula that the period is 2 pi divided by b. If we set these equal to each other, this tells us that 2 pi over b equals pi. If we cross multiply, we have that 2 pi equals pi b. We divide both sides by pi, and we get b equals 2. Finally, the amplitude is 2. However, the number out in front is not necessarily the amplitude. It could be positive or negative. And in this case, the graph starts out heading downward. So we know that a is going to be the negative amplitude. So putting this together, we know that y equals negative 2 sine of bx, so 2x, and there's been no shift. So y equals negative 2 sine 2x. Let's now look at how we would write this as a cosine function. So if it's a cosine, cosine starts at the peak. So we've got to choose one of these peaks, maybe this here, or here, or here, one of these as a starting point. I'm just going to go with this one, the first peak that I see. I'm going to call this the starting point. So our phase shift, I see that this has been moved right by pi over 4. If this is pi, this is pi over 2. So half of that is pi over 4. The x value for our starting peak is at positive pi over 4. So I see the shift is positive pi over 4. How about the amplitude? So the amplitude, just like for the sine graph, the maximum height is 2. However, this graph starts out, our peak that we decided to start at is at negative 2. So the a in this is going to be negative 2. And then finally to find b, we use the same formula as before, that period is 2 pi over b. And the period from one peak to the next, from 5 pi over 4 back to pi over 4, that distance is pi. So just like the same computation we did before, we know that b is going to be 2. So we've got b, we've got a, we've got the shift, but we need to somehow find the c that's in this formula here. What I like to do is to start writing the equation. I know y equals negative 2 cosine of b is 2 times x minus the shift. Or in this case, x minus pi over 4. If we distribute this 2 through, we get y equals negative 2 cosine of 2x minus, we can reduce these fractions after we distribute, pi over 2. So we can write this either as a sine or as a cosine.